Thank you all for coming and for this invitation to be here. This morning I opened the talk up to questions throughout, and I think it actually went quite well. I asked people that if they have individual questions about their own personal stuff to maybe save those for the end, but if you want me to expand a little bit more on something I'm saying or if I'm not being clear, I certainly invite you to raise your hand or make a suggestion for me speaking up a little bit more about a particular topic you're interested in, and I will try to save some time for questions at the end. So let me just introduce you to the brain. I think it's such an easy thing to take for granted. We all have aching backs and hips and joints, and I think it's really easy to forget that there is this little teeny organ up in your skull that represents about 2% of your body's weight, but burns about 70% of its energy. It is an unbelievable machine in terms of what it requires to fuel it and to keep it going. And it's not just made of neurons. About half of the brain are supporting, insulating cells that provide the nutrition and nourishment for healthy brain function. Microglia, I list on there, and don't be intimidated by some of the vocabulary words I throw out. I don't need you to be a neurologist. I don't care if you've never heard the word microglia before. I'm going to talk to you about leaving your comfort zone, and if you ignore half of what I say, that's fine. I just want to give as much information as I can so that those of you who want it can have it. But the microglia is something that are really important because they are like a light switch. They're on or they're off. And I think that that is going to become a more commonplace vocabulary word over the next few years, because what we're realizing is that for all of these degenerative diseases, Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, a lot of the diseases that are associated with brain inflammation, what we have is at a pivotal point in the disease process is activated microglia. They are either on or they are off. And they are, you can think of them as kind of sounding a bullhorn alarm system. It's like a fire alarm. When you flip the switch and you turn them on, they essentially sound an alarm bell that tells your entire body and brain to get and stay inflamed because you're under attack. And so we have known for decades that activated microglia are perpetuating degenerative diseases of the brain. We've known that. What I really had not appreciated until really this year is that probably one of the biggest factors involved in determining whether or not your microglia are on or off is abdominal obesity. So I think that really came as big news to me. Aesthetically, socially, I get that people come in different shapes and sizes, and I have never ever asked my patients to lose weight for their figure or, for cardiovascular disease, it's a good idea. Obviously, I know that being obese is not in your best interest, but narrowing into a healthy brain and brain function, I had never realized the degree to which abdominal obesity determined whether or not your brain was on inflammation or off. And so that's why I want to introduce some words like microglia and things like that, because they're pivotal switches in terms of what goes on and how things go on. So the brain is protected by this nice tight blood-brain barrier. The reason I think that's really important is because one of the things I'm going to talk to you about is that there is a loophole to the blood-brain barrier. If you want to get some nutrients into your brain, there is one way to get them in that doesn't involve the blood going from bloodstream across the blood-brain barrier into the brain, and that's smelling them. The smell of tea, the smell of coffee, the smell of cinnamon and clove is an easy, free, inexpensive way to get some fabulously strong antioxidants into the brain. So that's why I wanted to bring up the blood-brain barrier. And the other thing I think is really important is cerebrospinal fluid bathes the brain and keeps it protected and safe. And I'll talk about this a little bit at the end, but I'll just tell you right now, at night while you sleep, there is a huge penetrance of this blood-brain, of the cerebrospinal fluid deeper into the neurons, into the cells. And so most of the cleaning up, detoxification, healing that happens there, over the course of a day, you make a ton of free radicals. Your brain generates a tremendous amount of waste. I mean, think if you're burning that much of the body's resources, you're also creating that much waste. And so what happens is this very metabolically active organ is creating a ridiculous amount of waste products, the free radicals, the protein aggregates. And then at night while you sleep is when you clear them all out. And you need to sleep. It's during sleep that the cerebral spinal fluid seeps deeper and deeper into the brain. And that's where the detoxification of cellular detoxification takes place. So we used to think that when you were born, that most of the brain developed during your third trimester while you were in your mother's womb, and that most brain development occurred in the first 4 or 5 years of life, and then kind of slowed down into your teenage years, and by the time you were about 17, 18, you were pretty much what you had was what you had. It's hard to teach an old dog new tricks, right? We've heard that. In the last decade, this amazing field of neuroplasticity has opened up, and we are essentially realizing we have been wrong. For decades, we have been wrong, that the adult brain absolutely can change. And so the science of neuroplasticity is really the science of how do you take an adult brain and help it grow in new directions, learn new tools, learn new tasks. And these aren't just motor things. We're also talking about taking an adult brain and making it make cells that are better at producing dopamine and serotonin and acetylcholine, which are useful for happiness and pleasure and movement and memory and learning. And so when we're talking about neuroplasticity, we aren't just talking about learning how to play guitar in your 80s. We are talking about how to really reprogram your brain to have a different state of, a different reality. Epigenetics is another field that has opened up. And again, we don't need to get into that, but we used to think that your genetic code was set. You inherit half your genes from your mother, half your genes from your father, and that's your code. We now know that every day there are variable things that you are exposed to, foods you are exposed to, social stressors you are exposed to that change your genes. And that is mind-blowing. And so that is the field of epigenetics. And that is this idea that the genes you're born with are one set of instructions, but those can be manipulated and modulated for better and for worse via decisions and things that you come across in your day-to-day activities. So I put this on here. I know most of you are not pregnant here right now or probably planning on being pregnant in the very near future. But I do think this is a fabulous book. The woman who wrote its name is Sandra Steingraber. And for those of you who are planning on having kids or have kids who are having kids, this is a great wake-up call. It's just a place you can go for more information. But the name of the book is Having Faith. And this woman is a toxicologist who gets pregnant. And what she does is this kind of she goes chapter by chapter, and so during her first month of pregnancy, she talks about all of the environmental chemicals that mess up the brain of a 1-month-old fetus, and second month, third month, and it is both depressing and scary and empowering. And so it's one of those if you're not upset, you're probably not paying attention sort of things, where it is so easy to go about our day thinking that we are mostly safe, and then when you really kind of pull the cover off a little bit, you realize that there are little landmines all over the place, and it is so easy to be ignorant. And that really, if the goal here is longevity and long, healthy brain function, that's not going to serve you well. You have to pull your head up out of the sand and kind of get a sense of who is responsible for protecting me. And we live in a fabulous country that has a really fabulous FDA, and I have 100,000 great things to say about our system. But a lot of what we're exposed to, I mean, the rule that we have for chemicals and toxicants in our environment is, for instance, in Europe, if you have new chemicals, a lot of the way the rules are set are the company has to first prove they're safe before they can be entered into the human use. Ours are the opposite. There's kind of a free-for-all in terms of introducing chemicals into the environment, and it is up to the public to prove that they caused harm in order to take action. And so it leaves the patients, or us, our citizens, in this really uncomfortable zone where we're responsible for doing our own education to figure out what is or is not a risk. So it's a confusing world, and there's not a lot of funding to find out if chemical A is causing problems with disease B and C. And so I'm here to encourage you to get a little more educated, and I'm not going to be a big buzzkill and take away all your favorite things and tell you that everything's bad for you. But I do want to help you realize that there are some real safe zones, that things that you can eat and do lots of with no problem, and some things that are just probably better left alone. So we've already talked about how there is this, the thing I want to say here about neuroplasticity. I've already talked about brain growth happening in kids, but in Alzheimer's disease, there's this really neat thing that we know, which is the more education you get, the more protected you are against dementia. And it's not for any other reason that every new thing that you learn becomes a track in your brain. Every time you learn something new, you get thicker, stronger tracks. And so it's as simple as the more things you learn and the better you get at learning something, we all start to fall apart with age, the more you can afford to lose before there's a problem. And so it's kind of like stacking the deck to your favor. And so you don't need to go out and get another degree. You don't need to go to college. But if there is anything that I'm encouraging you to do, it is to leave your comfort zone and learn some new tasks. And I'll talk about this later, but the more uncomfortable, the more novel, the more outside your comfort zone these new experiences, the better it works. So if you've always had a desire to play the cello, if you've always wanted to salsa, really, it is great for your brain to be 75 years old and going to salsa and starting. All you're doing is making it so that you're essentially stacking your deck. So getting this into food. So there are a couple different ways to think about food. And I want to make sure that you all know that taste buds are modifiable. I don't want to hear anyone here say, I don't like X. It's not how it works. I mean, you may have not found a way to eat eggplant that you enjoy yet, but that doesn't mean you don't like eggplant. And there are a bunch of studies, especially around kids, that, some saying it takes 12 exposures to a food before you start to develop the taste for it. And they're doing really neat research that the more diverse diet the mother eats while she's pregnant, the more diverse the taste buds of the child. I mean, the more spicy foods a mom eats while she's pregnant, the more spice the kid can handle. So you can probably maybe a little bit blame your mother for if you're a picky eater. But I do want to tell you that just get away from this idea of I can't, I don't, that's not who I am, and kind of think about this in terms of who you want to be and what's available, and just change the way you speak about this. Oh, I haven't found a way to enjoy green tea yet. It's not that you don't like it, you just haven't found a way to enjoy it yet. And so just kind of brainwash yourself into this new way of thinking. The more processed foods and candy you eat, the harder it's going to be to find real fruits and vegetables that you do enjoy eating. It's kind of like giving somebody cocaine and then saying, here, have a cup of coffee. Doesn't that wake you up? Compared to what you just had, no. And so I'll get into this a little bit more, but these processed foods are such a bolus of stimuli to your taste buds. I mean, you get such a burst of sugar and intensity on your taste buds that a strawberry pales in comparison. And so what you're essentially doing is kind of polluting the entire environment of your taste buds and your brain's connection to what taste is and isn't, should and shouldn't be. And so it doesn't, it's not like eat a piece of candy and you've destroyed something, but I do want you to realize that these little teeny decisions that you make, the bank gives you a little a sucker at the bank. I mean, these little decisions that you make, it's so hard to, at the time you're eating that sucker, to realize this is going to mean that my kale tastes worse to me when I try and eat it tomorrow. But it's true, it really does. And ask anyone if you macrobiotics is this way of eating that from Japan, Michio Kushi kind of started the movement, but it's kind of based on this idea that you eat local and in season and depending on where you're at, and some really sound philosophies. But it's neat, I lived with a house of people who were eating a macrobiotic diet. It was a really rough couple of years. It was vegan macrobiotic crew. But I will tell you, after 4 or 5 months, brown rice was sweet. You know, and from my Mountain Dew days to brown rice being sweet was quite the journey. But it does happen. And so when you taste brown rice or you taste some of these things, I feed my parents some of my food and they think it tastes like cardboard. And it does if you had Mountain Dew just before that. And so, you know, I want you to just kind of help yourself reprogram your relationship with food, because this is absolutely modifiable. And another thing, just in terms of tricking yourself, I don't know how many of you are here with your partners or how many of you are open to tricking your own self. But there are a lot of foods that I don't like, that my family doesn't like, and you would be shocked what I can get in marinara sauce. You know, and my kids wouldn't touch mushrooms if I paid them. My husband wouldn't touch eggplant. It's all in the pasta sauce they eat every time they eat it. You know, if I make a meatloaf, they have no idea how many vegetables have been slipped into that. And so, you know, be open about that, but realize what you're doing is not just slipping good food to yourself, you're training your taste buds to get more familiar with some of those more unfamiliar foods. I don't know if you have any food delivery services around here. Like we have in Seattle, we have a bunch of, you know, every Thursday they show up with a huge box of vegetables and fruits on my doorstep. Cheap, $20 for a box. I couldn't get that any place. And I don't know what to do with a whole bunch of burdock. I mean, you know, and so there is this, you know, my husband and I kind of play this game, like, who can find a way to get that box in our bodies? You know, it's like, I never would have bought that much burdock, but when it shows up on your door, that's a great way to kind of increase your diversity curve of your diet. I mean, there's this one study that says the average American eats the same 10 foods over and over and over. That's it. They don't stray. We are creatures of habit, and that is why we are having the problems that we're having. So if there are any tricks you can play on yourself to really increase that. Mental health is not really my area of expertise. Early in my career, I worked with a lot of depression, anxiety, bipolar, things like that early on. That's not what I'm good at, and it's not what I want to talk to you about, but I thought it would be irresponsible to not spend a minute just acknowledging that the mind and the brain are not separate. That somewhere along the line, psychiatrists took one turf and neurologists took some other turf, and they're not. I mean, it's an arbitrary separation, and I just wanted to say that most everything I'm saying today is going to be applicable to improving one's mental health. And when we really look at things like low blood sugar, irritability, depression, mood swings, alcoholism, the mechanisms that are causing a lot of these mental health issues are the same mechanisms that are causing neurologic disease and neurodegenerative disease. So, you know, there's a study that just came out. I spent a lot of time this morning talking about curcumin. Curcumin, for those of you who weren't here this morning, is the active ingredient in turmeric. Turmeric, the Indian spice that makes mustard yellow. And so there's amazing new research that has come out October 2014 showing that curcumin was fabulous compared to placebo for treating depression. So when I'm saying that these have a same mechanism of action, you know, that same spice I told you worked so well for neurodegenerative diseases this morning also has as a side effect or another treatment, it improves your mood. And so we don't know what the mechanism is. Is it that it inhibits MAO oxidase, which raises your serotonin and dopamine levels? We don't know if it's just so anti-inflammatory. There are other anti-inflammatories that have been studied for depression. And we don't, or is it the high antioxidant content? We don't know. We don't know, but, you know, a study came out yesterday, I want to say, that was the first time that they said that antidepressants, especially in men, antidepressants made one like their partners less. And it was more than just decreasing their libido, that that some of the antidepressants were emotionally blunting people and just causing this distance from their partners. And, you know, I can see where something like that would be so insidious, that you'd start your antidepressant and it's not like overnight you don't like your partner anymore. I mean, over a couple months, you just start falling out of love. You don't like them so much. You know? And so before, you know, I think these are the things that we just need to stay abreast of this knowledge and heads up and know that these are side effects. And if you're finding yourself, if you're on an antidepressant and you don't like your partner anymore, you know, there are other tools and trades out there. And I'm not, for those of you who don't know me or haven't heard me speak before, I am not anti-pharmaceutical drugs at all. There is a time and a place for everything. What I study is kind of the offensive approach. You know, when people ask me how do I work with their conventional doctors and how do I do this, I often give the analogy of a sports team. I'll ask what's more important, the offensive or the defensive line. And so what most of our pharmaceutical drugs are like the defensive line. You already you're just trying to not get scored on. You've already lost control of the ball. Now you're just trying to prevent the goal. And we're just treating the symptoms. That needs to happen. We need a strong defensive line, and I want you to use whatever tools and resources you have to not get scored on. My research in my area of interest, in my area of expertise, is the offensive line. What's causing this? How do we make it so that you don't even need that stuff? What is causing the depression? And I would actually argue that we're not eating enough plant-based nutrients. I mean, as simple as this is, I can sum up 2 doctoral degrees, a master's degree, and an undergraduate degree in nutrition and 12 years of practice by saying, eat more fruits and vegetables, sleep, and exercise. Done. I mean, I could have saved a lot of money and time. And really, I feel like the end of the day, that's the answer. I mean, if you get half of your caloric intake from fresh fruits and vegetables, you don't have a lot of the problems that we're talking about. And it's not individual meals, it's zooming out and the big picture of it all. I'm not going to read this whole thing, but what I want to point out is it was 1968 when Linus Pauling, the only person in history to win 2 unshared Nobel Prizes, he's not an idiot, suggested that perhaps some of these psychiatric diseases that we're seeing, psychosis, depression, are because this brain, which is so metabolically active and so hypersensitive to what's going on in your bloodstream, is more sensitive than other parts to nutritional deficiencies. And so in 1968, he said, listen, all of these symptoms of mental illness that we're seeing that we can't find treatments for are really symptoms of nutritional deficiencies. Could it be that the brain is just the first to present these symptoms, and that's where we should go? And they laughed at him and said, oh, you silly guy, you might know physics and chemistry, but you sure don't know biochemistry. And he died, and we're still not quite to where he was in 1968. So I'm here to talk to you about how to nourish the brain. This is a picture of the brain, and what is so fascinating about this is not the whole brain. This is what the outside trim of every cell looks like. And the reason for this picture is because I want to show you how much fat is in there. Those big globs, and I had to look really hard, but the little yellow things in there are cholesterol. Most of the brain is fat. And so we have become such a fat-averse society. The low-fat craze was so prevalent for so many years that I find what has happened is I think a lot of people are afraid of fat, and they've filled their calories with carbs. And I think it has come at a tremendous expense to get rid of some of the fats. And when I say fat, I'm not encouraging you to have bacon 3 meals a day. You can get healthy fats. There's a book called Good Fat, Bad Fat. I'll talk about the coconut oil craze, avocados, nut butters. I mean, fat, virgin olive oil and safflower oil and sunflower oil, that's all fat. And so I'm going to be teaching you a couple of tricks to get good, healthy fats into your body. But really, if you were to say, what is a single good thing I could do to nourish my brain? It's get more good, healthy fats. You don't need to know a whole bunch of this other than I think it's a beautiful picture, and it helps paint a nice visual of how one cell, when we're talking about cells providing insulation and nourishment to the cell, you know, you have this one cell called an oligodendrocyte, and its job is to nourish and insulate and protect 10 different neurons. And so in multiple sclerosis, this insulation system starts to break down, and that's why people get the symptoms they get, is because as the nerve impulses travel up and down the nerves, without that insulation, they short circuit and the nerve impulse doesn't go through. And so when I'm talking about neurons, when I'm talking about nourishing the brain, I'm not just talking about the neuron. I'm talking about nourishing the support system. This slide talks about cholesterol in the body, and what I want to point out here is, you know, we all go, I don't know where blood is, way down in here, but we all go in and get our blood cholesterol levels checked. There is that first line in terms of, this is if we were to, this is kind of a gross concept, but if we were to take you and grind you up in a blender and measure the cholesterol level in all your different organs, this is what we get. And so the brain is by far where we keep most of our cholesterol. And in fact, you know, there are a lot of cultures that eat brain. And what the brain of the Peking duck, the brain of certain mammals. And so that is a delicacy in some places, and there are some prions and some other really good reasons to not be eating brain. But the point of this is showing you that, yes, cholesterol can be too high, and I would say that too high of cholesterol is very detrimental to an aging brain. I mean, cardiovascular disease, one of the reasons that cardiovascular disease is such a problem is what it's doing to the the blood flow system of the brain. If you start to get cholesterol caked into your arteries, what happens is there's not enough room for those red blood cells to float through, and you essentially form these little teeny areas where blood flow is completely cut off to different areas of your brain once you start plaquing up your arteries. So I am not here to tell you, yeah, more cholesterol is better, but I do want to say that too little cholesterol is also a huge problem. In nutrition, there's something called a U-shaped curve. And people who have cholesterol levels under 160 are 3 times more likely to be depressed. And so because most of our country has high cholesterol, we don't talk about people with low cholesterol. But it is not good enough to have your doctor say, oh, you're fine, you're not high. There's a whole other conversation that has to be had, which is, but am I low? And we have, you know, as more and more people are on statins, and statins are making their way into, you know, primary care practices, and we treat anyone over 200. We say that you should probably be on some statin. What we're running into is this idea that for even the physicians who aren't keeping up with the low cholesterol topic, the idea is the lower the better. And that's not necessarily true. So like I said, 3 times more likely to be depressed under 160. I saw a patient Monday whose total cholesterol was 140, and his doctor said, it's not low enough, let's double your dose of statin. And so from brain insulation to depression to mental health, I just want to start to open up this conversation about some of these things that we think of as bad in the right dose are actually really good. So for those of you unfamiliar with the topic of cholesterol deficiency, I just put a couple references on here. But people who have low cholesterol are more likely to have aggressive behavior, violence, depression, more likely to attempt suicide. And there are 2 studies that show that people with Parkinson's, the lower your cholesterol, the faster your disease progresses. Yeah?
Is this combined cholesterol? Would you say cholesterol is HDL, LDL?
Total.
Which other ones does it include?
What do you mean? So these studies have not broken down the good and the bad cholesterol. Arguably, if you're below 150, you're not going to have much of either. But you know, if you had a 160 and your total and your HDLs were 100, you know, you're probably cardiovascular-wise, you're probably fine. Do you have enough to insulate the brain? I don't know.
So what about someone who has cholesterol between 160 and under 200, but triglycerides, LDL, and HDL and LDL are low?
Okay, we'll talk about the individual stuff later, but the question had to do with what about 160 to 200 is optimal. That's where we want it. You know, I once read a study, I know that in America we flag cholesterol levels above 200 and we say those need to come down and be treated. And a few years back, I don't have the reference for this, I probably shouldn't mention it, but a few years back I remember reading that centenarians, people who live to be 100, the average cholesterol of a centenarian is 220. And that just made me smile that, you know, we are so convinced that if you're a 205, you need to come down lower. But when we really study the people who are thriving, they're higher than that. And so I don't, yes?
Well, we put faith in the so-called medical profession and the doctors. And if you're telling me that the information that they're giving us is wrong, who in the hell are we supposed to believe?
That's a great question, and I'm not. You should question everybody, including me.
But where do you go to get the other information to question it? I go to I got high cholesterol.
Yeah.
My doctor says, oh, you know, you got to lower your cholesterol.
Yep.
You got to lower your cholesterol. So I cut out bacon. I cut out sausage. I cut out butter. I cut out.
Yep.
God knows that everything. I'm dying of malnutrition. But still, I go to the doctor and says, well, you got to work on it more. You know, I don't know what else to do.
So, and he may be right. I mean, high cholesterol is a problem. It increases your risk of cardiovascular disease, and it increases your risk of dementia. We want you to not have high cholesterol, and I want it to come down, but it can come too far, too.
There are wonderful, to answer who can you believe, there are wonderful medical, I won't call them journals, but they are monthly publications. They are put out by prestigious universities, the latest, greatest research results. And when I was diagnosed with diabetes type 2, believe me, I decided to get educated. And there is stuff in there that the doctor doesn't even know about.
Right. And so the comment was the internet and books have a ridiculous amount of information, and the issue for you is how to sift through those and where do you go and which ones do you believe. And to the point about your doc not knowing, the information coming out right now is unbelievable. All I do is study nutrition and Parkinson's, and I do it about 80 hours a week, and I can't keep up. If you're going to a general practice doc, I don't care what his or her intentions are. You can't know it all, and you can't be good at it all. And I realize that, you know, there's this whole problem with specialization where you can't see the forest for the trees. But in this day and age, I would really encourage you to have a relationship with a nutritionist and have a relationship with an endocrinologist and have a relationship. One of the resources I'm going to talk about, I have their visual as the last slide or one of the last slides on here, but Harvard School of Public Health is fabulous. And what they have done, and I'll give you the punchline here, it's on the last slide, is they have made a plate of recommendation for how you should eat free of all politics. They took all the lobbying money out of it, they took all industry out of it, and they said just looking at the science alone, what should the human body, what should we eat? And their recommendation is great. I mean, it's not that different than the one that the U.S. RDA or the FDA puts out, except they took the glass of milk off the side and replaced it with water. But you know, and we'll talk about all that. But yeah, there are resources out there, and if you email me, I can maybe send some to the Neuroscience Resource Center. Just some reliable, good websites that you can go to. There are about 10 that I trust and I think are great. And you know, one that I'm on tape. I don't know if I should say this, but Life Extension magazine, I think is actually really quite good. I get that subscription for family members a lot, and they have very good scientists kind of filtering through this nutrition data, and they make a great publication that. And so, but what they'll do is they'll have a great article on theanine, and you read it, and you get educated and informed, and you get really excited about theanine. And by the time you're done with this article, which is 100% medically accurate, you flip the page and they're selling theanine. And frankly, every year the Consumer Reports does a quality control check, and 50% of over-the-counter supplements do not have in them what the label says they have in them. Every year, Life extension products are top rated. They do make a good quality product. My only complaint about them is people who read Life Extension magazine, it's really easy for them to come in with 47 supplements because they get excited about it all and it all makes sense. And then pretty soon they're on this laundry list of things and they don't know why they're on it. And so, as long as you have some ability to impulse control your shopping habits, it is a fabulous place to get educated and informed about some of this stuff. So all I want to say about this slide, we don't need a whole chemistry lesson here, but what I want to say is that there is this idea of the omega-3 to omega-6 ratio. Omega-6 foods are most of the fats that you come across. I mean, the point here are the omega-3s are what we're not getting enough of. Flax and fish are probably where you get your omega-3s. And so what the issue is here is this is just chemistry. When you're not eating enough fish and you're eating a standard American diet, what you're doing is messing up your 3 to 6 ratio. And what that means is during this, I don't have my pointer, but see where that red spot is? In the 2 position on fats, the 6s will bump the 3s out of the way. And so when we look at indigenous cultures, people that live off the land, people that live near waterways, and they eat a lot of fish and a lot of plants, the ratio of our ancestors and people who have not yet been exposed to planes, trains, and automobiles, they have more like a 1-to-1 or 2-to-1 ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acids. In the United States, the average ratio is about 20-to-1. And so it's just a chemical issue where we are with the lunch that you have. If your lunch wasn't at least 50% fruits and vegetables and fiber and plant living foods, what you did was you bumped a lot of fats you gave yourself more 6s than 3s. And that's how we end up getting into the trouble that we're in. And so it's not that what you had for lunch is bad, but it all adds up. And so this is where little tricks like taking a tablespoon of fish oil can really help. I mean, it just brings that ratio back into balance. So this was, I don't know how many of you are here specifically because of your interest or affected by a neurodegenerative disease, but I was just trying to demonstrate here that when we are seeing kind of universally in all of the neurodegenerative diseases this issue with dysregulated, dysfunctional lipids in the brain. And so it's not like you can take a tablespoon of oil and make all your problems go away, but I do want to make sure that you realize that, think of the smell of rancid oil, right? You've all smelt rancid oil. I mean, that's lipid peroxidation. That's happening in your brain. Your brain is 70% fat. And what happens is if you have too many free radicals, those fats oxidize and they clump together and the fats start to oxidize and that causes the proteins to start to clump together. And I showed this, I don't think I showed it here. That it doesn't matter which proteins clump, it's all the same disease. So Alzheimer's, Lewy body dementia, Parkinson's disease with dementia, Parkinson's disease, multiple system atrophy, we treat all of these neurodegenerative diseases like they're different, and they're not. They are different proteins clumping up in different parts of the brain, so you experience very different symptoms depending on which one you have. But upstream, when we're talking about the dysfunction of the oxidation of these fats and the consequential proteins clumping together, it's all the same. So when we figure out one, all of them will benefit, but it's not that. Yeah.
I missed the connection between the ratio of the 2 different types of omega fats and oxidation.
So I don't know that they're totally connected other than when the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3s is higher, what you do is you set a pro-inflammatory state in the body. So what you do is when you have a whole bunch of EPA and DHA, or the omega-3 fatty acids, what happens is those produce something called their cytokines are chemical messengers, and they are very anti-inflammatory. When you have a whole bunch of omega-6 fats, what you do is you make more of something called arachidonic acid, and that sets the stage for inflammation. And so what you have are these chemicals floating around your body like this, just ready to pounce. You give me some diesel exhaust, I'm ready to get inflamed over it. You give me a fried piece of food, it gets inflamed over it. And so what happens is the more of this omega-6 and the less omega-3 you have, the greater your propensity to an inflammatory cascade. And that will cause kind of this downward spiral of inflammation.
How do you know they have more of them?
The question was, how do you know if you have more? You know, this is not a test that I do clinically, but I keep intending to. But there are some labs that don't just measure cholesterol. Like, you know, you all know your LDL score. There are some labs that are now measuring your oxidized LDL, which I think makes a lot more sense. And the companies that are doing it are suggesting that that is a much better predictor of cardiovascular disease and the things that we're really worried about. And that, frankly, makes a lot of sense to me. Yes?
Going back to the peroxidation.
Yep.
And protein clumping, is that tau protein? Like, is that what they're finding?
Yeah, so in Alzheimer's and Lewy body dementia, we get tau clumping together. In Parkinson's, we get alpha-synuclein clumping. In Huntington's disease, we get different ones. In ALS, we get different ones. And kind of, it's just different proteins in different regions that cause radically different symptoms. So why do we eat? It's not just to nourish ourselves. We eat when we're bored. We eat when we're stressed. We eat because there's food in front of us. We eat when we are nervous. We eat when we're depressed. We eat when there's a party. We eat when it's a celebration. And so, you know, I want you to really spend some time thinking about what does the body need to survive and what does the body need to thrive. And they're different questions. I mean, without vitamin C, you will die. Without iodine, you will develop a goiter. Children may develop mental retardation, but they don't die. So it's not like our criteria for a nutrient is that it's required for life. It's required for health. And so if we're going to say a nutrient is anything that with this nutrient, the body performs better, dysfunction does not ensue, then that opens up a whole world of nutrients that are not above and beyond what we're talking about. You know, I'll talk about lithium deficiency and things like that. But we eat a lot. I'm getting confused between this lecture and last. But did I already tell you about the 30% of the foods that we eat are you don't remember eating the day before? Yeah. So I mean, it's just we do so much mindless eating, and so. Nutrition doesn't just come from food. I mean, I think that that's the biggest misconception of people. When I come to speak, people are expecting me to tell them what to eat. And, you know, I'll talk to you about what to eat, and I'm going to talk to you about that plenty, but I want to make sure that everyone here knows that nutrition is not food. The study of nutrition is the study of the human dependence on our environment. You know, and so UV light, the organisms living in your gut, oxygen, the air that you breathe, love, social contact. Without these things, human health suffers. And so when you really step back and think about what is nutrition, it is the study of what do we need to get from our environment in order to thrive. Nutrients come in a lot of different shapes and forms, and when we talk about nutrition, you know, it is the most superficial, simple conversation here has to do with macronutrients, fats, carbohydrates, and proteins. I'll include alcohol in that because it provides so many of us so many calories and takes up space. But it offers you no nutrition. It offers no micronutrients, except maybe anthocyanins in wine and flavonoids in beer. But we're not talking about macronutrients. I mean, we could eat a Twinkie right now, and we'd get some protein, some fat, and some carbs. We should just not even be talking macronutrients. That whole, you know, 30-30 ratios of how much you should eat. Just get that out of your head. It doesn't matter. What we care about is the composition of those fats, those carbs, and those proteins. Where are they coming from, and how jam-packed are they with nutrients? Micronutrients are what we really care about. I believe there's a picture on the next slide about there's a movie called Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead. I want every one of you to go home and watch it. It is really one of the best movies I've ever seen. You've heard about my nutrition degrees. I think I learned more watching this degree than in any of my academic training. I did not know that the human body could improve its function that much in 60 days. I didn't know it was humanly possible to have that much improvement, that great improvement in your physiology is what this man experiences over 60 days. And I'm not asking you to do what he did. What he does in the video, he's an Australian film producer who's got a good-sized belly on him. And he starts the movie by saying, I'm coming to America and I'm not going to eat any of your food. And he goes on a 60-day vegetable juice fast where, you know, breakfast, lunch, dinner, he's putting kale and collards and burdock and all this stuff in a blender and drinking it. And so he's doing a couple things. He's taking away all of the inflammatory foods that require digestion and require that kind of create work for our body to deal with, the things that aren't serving us well. He's putting it in liquid form so that the digestion is all done. So he's essentially just dumping pure micronutrients, and he's keeping the fiber in there, so you get the fiber, and dumping that in for 60 days. And he loses a ridiculous amount of weight, but even more profound than the weight loss is what happens to his eyes and his skin. I mean, you can watch over the video. He looks 20 years younger 60 days later than he started. And what I do is I'm not asking any of you to go on a juice fast. I'm not asking any of you to go on a one-day fast. I don't want, it's not sustainable. And, you know, frankly, the amount of veggies he's juicing probably cost $100 a day just to get it in. But it is such a pivotal thing to plant in your seed to get us all on the same page. When I say micronutrient, what you're talking about. I mean, before I watched this movie, and like I said, I'm fairly well educated about nutrition. Prior to watching this movie, if you had asked me to grade myself on my nutrition intake, micronutrition intake, I would have probably given my family a B+, A-. After watching this movie, I'd say we dropped down to about a D+. And so, you know, it's nobody likes to realize that you're way further behind than you thought you were. But it's really important, again, to pull your head out of the sand and just accurately size up where you're at. We were joking last night at dinner that, you know, we set this food pyramid. The 4 food groups became the food pyramid. Now it's the plate. And behind the scenes, we know that the human body needs 10 to 12 fruits and veggies a day to function. We know that. That's very well-established data. But since the average American's only getting 2, what we're doing as a public health campaign is telling you 5 to 6, 5 to 7, 5 to 7, just get to 5 to 7. And then there's the behind the scenes thinking is that once you're at 5 to 7, we'll tell you you're only halfway there. But, you know, what I'm here to tell you is for those of you who are currently eating 2 servings of fresh fruits and veggies per day, you have a long way to go. And so I'll talk to you a little bit about ways to stack the deck. And I have some slides at the end about food ideas and things like that. But, you know, for example, I'll just say right now, I'll save it for the slide. Fiber is in all, juicing takes away the fiber. It's not, you know, if you eat apple juice, drink apple juice, if I give you an apple, how many apples can you eat? 2, maybe 3? It takes a glass of apple juice has probably 10 apples in it. And so careful with juice because you do get some of the nutrition, the micronutrients from the juice, and that's good stuff. But what happens is when you remove the fiber, it becomes, when you keep fiber in your stomach, what happens is your stomach has to work to get at the sugars. So if you eat an apple, your stomach has to do a lot of work to get it. Oh, there's a molecule of sugar. Digs through the fiber, there's a molecule of sugar. And so what happens is there's this nice, slow, steady increase in your blood sugar after eating an apple. If you drink juice, it's the equivalent of crack. I mean, you put it in, it goes straight across your gut. There's no digestion to take place, no fiber to slow it down, and you get this huge peak in blood sugar immediately after, and usually a crash shortly after that. So I'm using juice as an example, but this is true for all processed foods. I mean, a bowl of cereal, the worst thing you can do is start your day with a bowl of cereal. The worst thing you can do is start your day with a bowl of cereal. There is no nutrition in it, and you're probably using, yeah. Well, I was gonna, yes. Protein for breakfast, veggies for breakfast, leftover dinner for breakfast. We'll talk about all that. So accessory nutrients are nutrients that we know the body needs, but not everybody necessarily needs to take them. The FDA has not called them essential. Coenzyme Q10, glutathione, flavonoids. We are going to realize over the next few years things like flavonoids that you get from plant foods are required nutrients. We haven't added new. I mean, there in the 70s every year we were adding a new nutrient to the list. Oh, we discovered B2, and now we discovered B3, and now we discovered B4, and we had all these. And every year we were finding a new nutrient, and we were deciding, and we'd put 5 men, healthy 18 to 20-year-olds, in a box and depriving them of niacin. And when they started to get pellagra, we'd say that's the dose of niacin that you need to not get pellagra. And so I want to make sure you all understand, when you read your box, I mean, when you get food and on the side of the box it says the RDA is 120 milligrams of X, please know that is the RDA for a healthy young individual, to not get scurvy or pellagra or whatever the disease is. The RDA is, and I do believe those numbers are good and accurate for a healthy young person. What we have never done is asked, what do elderly people need? As you age, do those needs change? And we know that people with certain diseases have different nutritional requirements that we don't accommodate. And so the way the FDA feels is we can't go through and do that for everybody's disease, so we'll let the Alzheimer's Association come up with what Alzheimer's patients need. We'll let the Parkinson's people figure out what's best for Parkinson's, and so on and so forth. So a little bit to my displeasure, I will say that they do make special accommodations for one group of people. It gets a whole set of special recommendations because we know that they need more nutrients. So we have men, we have women, we have children, we have pregnant women, and we have gone out of our way to tell smokers what they need. So we have not gone out of our way to find out the nutritional requirements for any person suffering with diseases, but we have made special accommodations for smokers because we know they deplete their body of nutrients and therefore they need more. And so this is, and so when I say this, because I want you to get a little riled up, not because you need to get mad at somebody, but because it's our responsibility to call and ask and help find ways to get more research done for us. And then microorganisms are, I don't want to dwell on this, I know half of you were probably here this morning, but the bugs that live in our gut are amazing, and more, I mean, you can't read a newspaper anymore without learning about microorganisms and intestinal flora. The organisms living in our intestines outnumber us 10 to 1. We are working for them. They regulate 80% of our immune system function. There are whole groups of yeast in our gut that when they start to die off, as some certain yeast strains start to die, they will actually secrete chemicals that make you want sugar. And that's how they keep themselves alive. I mean, and all you know is I have a sweet tooth. I need something. I want something. But you're just working for them. And so I think it's so important as we're learning more and more about intestinal microflora, and people are doing, fecal transplants now and curing ulcerative colitis and Crohn's. I mean, because what we're realizing is it really is all coming down to the bugs in your gut. Yeah?
What's the difference between prebiotics and probiotics?
I think I have a slide on that, but the question was, what's the difference between a prebiotic and a probiotic? And a prebiotic is essentially the fibers that the probiotics live off of. So it's food for the probiotic.
When we talk about breakfast cereals, are all cereals in the same thing? They're cooked with the sugar things that are in millions of boxes.
Yep. So the question is, are all breakfast cereals really bad? And probably not. I mean, the more fiber it has in it, probably the better off you're going to be. But they're often all very highly processed. And what you're doing, and what I want you to start thinking about is this meal as packed with nutrition as I can make it? And if you're looking down at something white on your plate, the answer is no. And it's easy to do. And I mean, think about it. I mean, how many times have you been told breakfast is the most important meal of the day? And how many of us, really, truly, honestly, raise your hand if you think you have 2 servings of fruits or vegetables with your breakfast meal? Call the serving the size of your fist. Yep. Great. Okay, so a quarter of you, a third of you. I mean, but you're not going to get to your 10 to 12 servings a day if you don't start with your morning meal. I mean, and so it's not that the cereal is bad, but what you've done is filled your stomach with something that takes up space and provides calories without any micronutrients. So, and many of them are fortified. So this book, for those of you who want a little more conversation on carbs, and I don't endorse everything that's in this book. This is just a way to get on the same page and realize some of the conversation that is being had in medical circles. David Perlmutter is a board-certified neurologist in Naples, Florida. He is a very well-educated man, and he is a nutritionist, and he understands a lot of this stuff. And this book has changed a lot of people's lives. He is fairly extreme in his opinion. He thinks that you shouldn't eat an apple because it has too much sugar. And so I personally, in my personal life and in my clinic, don't go that far. But I will tell you that the number of patients who came into their first office visit, I'm really impressed with the number of people who said, I read this book, I changed my diet, and I cannot tell you what a difference it made. I've dropped 30 pounds and I have reduced my Parkinson's meds because everything's working better. And so what I will do on my first visit with people is make everyone, their homework for the first visit is to go home and read the book Grain Brain and watch the movie Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead. And it's not because I'm going to ask you to give up grains or I'm going to ask you to go on a juice fast. It's just these are great places to begin to get educated about when I talk about carbs, what are we talking about? And I will say that we were talking last night, there's a Patrick Holford is a fabulous scientist, doctor. He's a nutritionist in Britain. He's written 25 books on diabetes and nutrition and heart health. And he has done some fabulous, fabulous work, but he made a very convincing case. You know, how many people are gluten-free or, you know, all these signs, gluten-free, gluten-free. And what he said recently that really made a lot of sense to me is stop with the gluten. Gluten is not the bad guy. You know, when we look around at all these different cultures and we look at the studies that talk about that use barley and rye in their diets, which are very high in gluten. Even oatmeal has some gluten in it. All of those studies show that barley and rye are actually very healthy foods. They are not associated with the same problems that wheat consumption is associated with. And so his opinion is it's not that gluten is bad, it's that the way we are processing wheat is causing some problems for people. So careful that it's gluten. For those of you who don't know, gluten is one of the main proteins in wheat. And so it's really easy to say I'm gluten-free and you can, you know, it does make it simple. But the reality is there are ways to get gluten and get some fiber in there, and that it's not completely essential you get rid of all grains. I think mushroom barley soup is fabulous.
What was his last name again?
Holford, Holford. So we talked about lipids a little bit, you know, and this, I've already kind of alluded to this. I think the most important thing to add in terms of fats come in so many different shapes and sizes. The big picture here is hydrogenated oil. If it doesn't go bad after 6 months, you shouldn't be eating it. Like, you want your food to rot. I mean, if it's not rotting, it's not food, okay? Real food rots. So that's probably a good starting and ending place there. Here's what I like about fat. It is an easy way to increase satiety. I think that, as we already talked about, there are 100 different reasons that we eat. And there's a whole science behind how do you feel full. And so what ends up happening is there are two real ways that the body feels full. You can get enough food in your stomach to stretch your stretch receptors. We've been there, Thanksgiving meal last night perhaps. Or you can have a chemical signal that you get enough fat in your bloodstream will tell your brain, I've had enough. And so for those of you who know that you overeat, that you have and where food is not to nourish, but food is to feel good, food is for pleasure, one easy way to kind of make some changes are to put more good, healthy fats in your diet. If you're going to have a salad, put some avocado in there. There's a lot of fat in an avocado. If you're going to have some rice, make it brown rice so that you get the fiber, but put some olive oil on it, or some sunflower oil or safflower oil. And what you're doing is you're increasing the good, healthy plant, they're called PUFAs, polyunsaturated fatty acids, which are really good for you, and it's an easy way to feel full a little bit faster. What oils? So the question is which oils? And really the research seems to be suggesting that all plant-based oils are equal. For years, I mean, we have 20, 30 years of research suggesting that fish oil does fabulous things for MS. And some researchers a couple years back did a really neat study comparing olive oil to sunflower oil to fish oil in MS. And it was really surprising that sunflower oil was better than the fish oil. And all of them were better than what would have been expected had they done nothing. And so there's a whole line of research that says, as long as it is a plant-based fatty acid, what I will tell you is when you're shopping for fats and oils, they are very sensitive to light. Fats oxidize, like we talked about the rancid fat. What you want to do is buy your oils in glass, in dark colored glass, if possible. So you don't want your clear plastic. The plastics get into your oils, especially if they get warm. But there is a company called Spectrum. I have no conflicts of interest to disclose, but there is a fabulous company called Spectrum that makes a reasonably priced oil. And what is really nice is that they come in nice glass bottles that are dark glass, but they have a little thermometer on the side of the bottle that helps guide you and teach you. It's educational just to buy their oil, because what it'll say is on the peanut oil that you can heat that up to higher temperatures before it oxidizes. Whereas something more like canola oil that grows in Canada in colder temperatures, you shouldn't be heating up. And so it helps kind of teach. And so just so you know, I mean, let's just think about fats for 1 second. The closer a fat grows to the equator, the higher the temperature it can withstand. And so that's just a little cheating way to do it. And then when you're trying to figure out what is a saturated fat or not, because the issue is that saturated fats are not, I mean, hydrogenated oils, just get them out of your life. Just don't touch them. They're not, to this day, we do not know of any way to get rid of them. Once they go in, they stay in. So just read labels, and if it says hydrogenated, get it out. There's a question in the back.
Going back with the oils.
Yep.
Any studies on genetically modified oils come from GMO versus non-GMO?
No. Not that I'm aware of. Yeah.
And wouldn't it be better to eat the peanuts rather than the peanut oil, and the olives rather than the olive oil, sunflower seeds rather than?
Yeah, I mean, the question has to do with isn't less processing better? And the answer is absolutely. The question was, isn't it better to eat the peanuts instead of peanut oil? And yes, I mean, to the extent possible that you can live off of whole foods, the better off you're going to be. But you know, that's if one has some appreciation for some of the world's culinary pleasures, there's a time and a place for a little bit of processing.
What are the best oils to cook with and fry?
The question is, what are the best oils to cook and fry with? So I would say don't be frying. And then in terms of cooking at low heat, any of the plant-based ones, sunflower, safflower, olive, I mean, use them all and mix them up. Diversity is key. Don't be one of those Americans that eats the same 10 things over and over. Butter. Well, butter's a touchy subject. So I love butter. And I'm just gonna say butter in moderation. But there is a huge move towards coconut oil. And so what we're talking about, I mean, the biggest thing that I will say about butter is that my husband is a toxicologist, and I find it absolutely amazing that when they want to know how polluted any area is, they just go buy a stick of butter from the area, and that's where all of the chemicals concentrate in the fat, the breast, you know, and so it is a great indicator of how much DDT and pesticides and stuff is in your environment. And so, you know, I think you have to be careful when you're using any animal product. And I'm not a vegan, but I do think that when you go to animal products, it's really easy to see it as a stick of butter and forget that it is the concentrate of all things the breast milk of the mom was trying to pass on to her calf. And it is really there's a study that says a human woman during her first 6 months of breastfeeding will pass on 50% of her accumulated lifetime toxicants to her firstborn child. And it's a dump. I mean, we store this stuff in our fat. I mean, people call me all the time and they say, I want to do a detox. What can I do? I'm like, go get pregnant and breastfeed, you know? But it's true. I mean, we accumulate all this stuff in our fats. And then when it's time to breastfeed, we dump it and we pass it all on, and we really underestimate what's being passed on. And so when we think about our food, it's hard to keep in mind, oh, where did this come from and what was its original purpose and blah, blah, blah. So to the extent that you can replace some animal products with vegetable products that accomplish the same task, I think that's a great idea. Coconut oil is getting a ton of press right now. I put this in here. We're not going to watch it. If you want to go home and Google it, it's on YouTube. This woman is a physician, I believe a pediatrician. She's not a neurologist. But her husband has Alzheimer's disease. And she started giving him coconut oil and has really gone quite public with the impressive improvements that they have seen by adding some coconut oil to his diet. And so that video has really kind of caused this wave of enthusiasm about the role of coconut oil in brain health. And so coconut oil is comprised 60% of medium chain triglycerides. If you don't like coconut oil, so my answer to the butter question is, if you're going to do some stir fry, you're going to fry up some veggies, do it in coconut oil instead of butter. It's a plant-based version that is a saturated fat that works similarly. You can get stuff that doesn't taste so much like coconut oil. The label will tell you if you like the coconut flavor or don't, get this one or that one. And for people who want the benefits of the medium chain triglycerides but don't want the coconut oil or don't like the coconut oil, you can get just plain old MCT oil. And what is so neat about this is this kind of emerging line of research that says, so, you know, how many of you are familiar with the ketogenic diet for epilepsy? So for years, we have known that you can eliminate carbohydrates from the diet of somebody who has epilepsy and do a fabulous job controlling their seizures. They have to almost live off of protein and fat, but you can essentially stop the seizures. And so and we don't fully understand why, but there's something about carbohydrates and how people with epilepsy's brain use carbs that creates more waste in excitatory chemicals and byproducts than it does fuel. It's almost like their brain cells are burning sugars inefficiently, and they're better off to just use fat and protein as their source of energy. And what is happening is, I believe the data is starting to show that Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and some of these neurodegenerative diseases are almost equally as responsive. That when you eliminate sugars and you give the body a bunch of MCTs or fats and proteins, that it starts metabolizing and making its energy much more efficiently. And so we're seeing, there are 3 drugs right now on the market that are starting major clinical trials to see if they can change the course of disease in Parkinson's disease, and 2 of them are diabetes drugs. We are finally all on the same page, where David Perlmutter's book Grain Brain and the pharmaceutical companies giving diabetes drugs for Alzheimer's and my talking about minimizing carbs, we're all saying the same thing. I mean, we need to get the sugar level down if you want to protect the brain. Yeah?
Getting back to the butter, does that apply to...
I thought you said you quit all that stuff in an attempt to lower your cholesterol.
You said, does that apply to cheese also? Anything made from cow's milk?
Okay, we're going to have a dairy talk. I'm from Michigan, and I like dairy. I would encourage you here to treat it as a condiment. I study neurology. Dairy consumption there have been 5 studies that ask, is there anything people with Parkinson's disease eat that increases their risk of Parkinson's? And all 5 studies have found one food, and that one food is dairy. The more dairy you eat, the more likely you are to get Parkinson's. This was actually quite a surprise to me, because when I was an undergraduate, I was studying osteoporosis. Well, I needed to have a final project, and I waited too long to do it. And so I thought, I know, I'll do dairy and bones, right? Because everyone knows that dairy protects bones. And so I thought I was getting off easy by choosing the simplest topic there was. What I didn't realize is that the more dairy any culture eats, the higher the rates of osteoporosis in that culture. So that was my first hint that there's more to the story than just, it is true, dairy is a great source of calcium. It really is. And I believe, what I tell my patients is eat as much dairy as what you would eat if you had a goat in your backyard. You're going to have, put some cheese on your Greek salad. Use it as a condiment here and there. But this whole idea of a bowl, your processed cereal in a bowl of breast milk is not good for your brain, and it's not good for your body. And I eat butter, and I eat dairy, and I eat cheese, and I like it. And I'm not telling all of you to stop. I'm telling you that we're doing way too much of it, and it's not the nutritious food that we've been told that it is. That there is a time and a place for it, and stop thinking of it as, don't make your kids. I can't tell you how many parents force their kids to drink their glass of milk. And what it is it's just a very inflammatory food. And so I do not think that any one of you needs to walk away from dairy forever. But I do think that when you reduce this, what I was going to say to that is, when you read the last 2 studies actually did a better job asking which type of dairy is worst. And so what they found was that ice cream, cream, and milk were the worst. Cheese, not so bad. Yogurt wasn't bad at all. No one has asked if goat milk or emu milk or camel milk or any other milk is different than cow milk. What? Yeah, so the great questions. What about almond milk, silk milk? Yeah, I think those are great alternatives. And again, it is a fast bowl of sugar. It's just pure sugar. But if you're cooking with it, if you're baking, great, it's a great use. I would encourage you to all move away from those easy, fast sources of calories and sugars. But yes, it's a step in the right direction. I'll warn you guys that there are a lot of estrogens, plant-based estrogens in soy. And so people tend to go gung-ho, and when you take everything dairy out of your life and replace it with soy cheese, soy ice cream, soy tofu, men will start to grow small breasts and get a little curvier in the hips and become more emotional. I've seen it. And so you can consume enough soy to have that be a dose of estrogen. So men, I don't know how much soy you might want. But keep that in mind. And then there is a concern that a little too much soy could cause problems for thyroid. They're goitrogens. And so soy can get in the way of thyroid function. So if you have a thyroid disease, you might want to keep tabs on that. Almond milk tastes fabulous. I think that's probably the best cow milk alternative on the market. I was really depressed last week to read somebody did a write-up about how ridiculously wasteful. I mean, it takes something like 45 gallons of water in California to get 1 gallon of almond milk. And they were saying, like the stuff that you're buying without thinking it through, we're not getting it so easily. Careful, be thoughtful about what you're doing. And of course, there's something wrong with everything, right? But I would say that almond milk is, in terms of, especially if you're in that transition zone where you're learning to like new foods, I say go straight to the refrigerated almond milk. It is the creamiest, tastiest, closest thing to cow's milk that you're going to get. Hemp milk is also, it will not get you high, but hemp milk is also very, very creamy. I would say almond milk and hemp milk are the two closest to the taste and texture of the dairy you're used to. Yep.
What about gold milk or donkey milk?
I don't know about donkey milk.
What was that, the MCT?
Yeah, medium chain triglycerides. But really, most of the people selling MCT oil don't even know that's what it stands for. It's just kind of known as MCT oil. So omega-3 fatty acids and risk of dementia. Yeah, there's a question.
What did you find out about osteoporosis?
So the people who argue that finding say that it's not the dairy that makes your bones weak, that people who eat a lot of dairy also eat a lot of meat, and that there are sulfur-containing amino acids in meat that make you urinate out all of your calcium. And so it is, and there are some sulfur-containing amino acids in dairy too. And so while it is a good source of calcium, the flip side is you're probably urinating out more calcium. It's been 20 years since I really dove into that body of research, but to my knowledge, no one had really at that time differentiated between, what if we take people who drink a lot of dairy but don't eat red meat? Because those two tend to go, when we go look at societies, any society that eats milk also eats a lot of meat. And so that's the problem with epidemiology studies. And so at the time that I had been interested in bone health, that was a big old question was, is it the dairy or is it the red meat or the combination? Yeah?
What about Bragg's amino acids?
So I don't know. I think that the question is, what about Bragg's amino acids? I know that my husband and kids like it on their popcorn. I don't. I don't believe it's a real good source of amino acids. I know chemically what goes into making and preparing and delivering amino acids, and I just don't believe there are a bunch of good ones circulating in that thing that kind of tastes like soy sauce. But I don't think there's anything bad with it if you like it. I can't speak to the nutritional value. So, okay. So omega-3 fatty acids and risk of dementia. I've already kind of put in a big plug for more fish, considering fish oil supplementation, that we don't get enough fish. I just found this really amazing, this research from 2010 that said that if Americans could increase their omega-3 fish, the Americans who consume the most fish, even after we adjust for education and income and all of that stuff, those with the highest fish intake had a 40 to 50% reduction in dementia. Those are big numbers. I mean, if we had a new pharmaceutical that we could give you that would cut in half your risk of dementia, it would be standard practice. I would take a pill that could cut my risk of dementia in half. But when it's as easy as having 2 or 3 servings of fish per week, we drag our feet at doing it. So let me just talk about fish. I mean, you don't have to have oily, expensive wild salmon. I don't want you doing farmed salmon because the pellets, the PCB content of the pellets that they're fed really gets into the meat. And so farmed salmon should be avoided. If you're going to eat salmon, please eat it wild. But you don't need salmon. We are elitist food eaters in this country, and there are some really good, inexpensive, oily fish that are, herring. Sardines, anchovies. I mean, it is not hard to find good sources of omega-3 fatty acids. And, these, I gave you a list. The omega-3 content of these foods is fabulous. I mean, we had the last Parkinson's meeting was in Stockholm. And that was one of the, it was absolutely fabulous to have, smoked fish for breakfast every day. I mean, that's just what people had. It was pickled herring and smoked fish, and we don't do that. And there's no good reason to not do it, except we're out of the habit. And those of you curling up your nose, stop. I mean, keep an open mind. It's not that you don't like pickled herring. It's that you haven't found a way to eat it yet that you enjoy. Yes. Huh? Krill oil. Krill oil, great. So that's a great question. So we are overfishing. We are fishing and depleting our waters from good, healthy fish. And so there is this move to get more omega-3 fatty acids from krill, are these little teeny organisms that the whales live off of. And so they are a very, very good source of omega-3. It is a much fishier taste. You're not going to find a bottle of krill oil. And so what I have a lot of patients who have digestive issues. It's hard. I mean, you can get a teaspoon of fish oil that we use in our clinic is the equivalent of 4 large caps. It is so much easier for people to take a spoonful every day or 2 than it is to take 4 caps. Krill oil is so fishy that it can't be in oil form, so it has to be in capsule form. So from an environmental perspective, it is far superior to fish oil. From a physical health standpoint, they're absolutely identical. It's a great source of DHA. From a practical standpoint, it's much harder to get patients to take 6 caps of krill oil than it is a spoonful of fish oil. Yeah?
In the 1940s, I think every kid on the planet got their dose of
cod liver oil.
What happened?
The biggest mistake we've made. I don't know why we ever strayed. I don't know why we've strayed. Yeah.
If omega and N are related, what is it? And omega-3, omega-6, N3, N6, what's N?
Good question. N is the chemical shorthand for the omega. It's just when you're out and about and you see N3 or omega-3, they're the same. It's just to save this other 1, 2, 4 letters, to save yourself writing 4 letters.
Nutrition.
Yeah.
Omega,
I don't know what the N stands for. It's just shorthand for, instead of writing omega-6 and 3, people write N3.
If I look omega in the dictionary, what would I find?
The Greek letter.
So
It's just chemistry. Chemistry shorthand. I don't know. You'd have to ask a chemist who studies history.
So there's all that stuff that you don't even know what it is.
Wow. I think you may be asking what's the fact?
What's
in it?
So what it means, chemically what it means is, if I go back and show you. So see that double bond? There are single bonds. So what happens is, when you see those single lines down on the bottom and then that double line, and see where it curves with that double line?
Yeah.
Okay, so what happens is, and this is true for these saturated fats, for hydrogenated oils, where you have that double bond, it's stiff and rigid. It's like being held in place by 2 different places, and you don't have this free wiggle room to move. And so what happens is, when you only have the single bonds, these are very fluid molecules, and they can move around. And so when we're talking about omega-3, it refers to 3 carbons in, you will get your first double bond. An omega-6 is 6 carbons in, you will get your first double bond. And so that's what we're chemically talking about. But why somebody decided to call the double bond omega and make N the shorthand, I have no idea. Yeah?
When you're talking about 3 servings of fish a week,
Yeah.
what's the serving size of fish?
3 ounces. What's the serving size of fish? 3 ounces tends to be the general rule. And so, you know, you can read this yourself, but I'm not just talking about brain health. I mean, you know, when you go get a new prescription from your doc, you have a conversation about what are the side effects? What can I expect? And so, you know, it's kind of funny to be talking about fish oil for brain health, because what are the side effects? And it's, oh, it lowers your triglycerides, less arthritis, less depression, less attention deficit disorder, greater, you know, I mean, the side effects of taking a little extra omega-3 are all positive, really.
I've been reading Dr. William Davis' book about Leak Valley Total Health.
Yeah.
He says krill oil does not have enough EPA or DHA.
So it depends on how much you take. So she's saying that krill oil doesn't have as much EPA and DHA, which is why I said with fish oil you take 4 caps. With krill, it's closer to 6. You have to take a lot more to get the same amount. And so this isn't entirely true, but generally speaking, so what we're doing is EPA, so you have these omega-3 fatty acids, and so they're chemically broken down by how many carbons. And so what happens is the longest omega-3s are considered the best. And so the EPA has 22 carbons, and the DHA has 24. And the reason this is important is most of the research suggests that EPA and DHA are the two molecules. That's what you want. When you're eating omega-3s, it is with the hopes that you will eventually get the EPA and DHA. That's the good stuff. Most of the research suggests that EPA is good for cardiovascular disease, and the DHA is better for the brain. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't mix and match, and if you find your fish oil, it'll have both in there. One thing I will encourage you to do is many of you think you're taking fish oil and you're not, or not taking much. There's this very sneaky marketing trick that a lot of people do where the bottle says 1,000 milligrams of oil. I mean, you buy fish oil and it says 1,000 milligrams down on the bottom, and when you flip it over, when you look at the EPA and DHA, you will find that those two combined total 300. And you have 700 milligrams of filler oil in there. So this is what we're talking about getting informed and getting educated, because people pull one over on you all the time. It's a lot cheaper to add a little canola oil to your fish oil. And it's true, there are 1,000 milligrams of oil in that capsule, but what you care about is the EPA and DHA.
When we look at the bottles of these things, should we look for the little thing, what is it, physicians, something that guarantees that the...
No, I think it's more important just to know what exactly you're looking for in the EPA and DHA. All right, I'm getting a nod to hurry up. Okay. Save the questions to the end. Thank you. Okay, so we've already talked a lot about fish oil. I'll just tell you that it decreases inflammation. We know it's antioxidant. What is really amazing is that it increases production of BDNF. Those of you who were around this morning, we already had a conversation about BDNF. It stands for brain-derived neurotrophic growth factor. And so that is something that is like fertilizer to the brain. It will make all your cells grow. It's best thing I can say is fertilizer. What is amazing is you can put neurons in a petri dish and add a little DHA, and it is true that the adult brain cannot grow a new neuron, but what it can do is take a neuron that has 8 branches, and in the presence of fish oil, those 8 branches will turn to 12 branches. And so you can make one neuron notably more functional. That neuron can't go on to have babies, but you can take the neurons that you currently are stuck with and make them behave and work better and act like there are more neurons. And so that is what fish oil does. Choline is another molecule that I'm really excited about. I think it's underutilized. There's no RDA for choline. it is essential for learning and memory. It will turn in your brain to something called acetylcholine. Many of you may be familiar with Alzheimer's drugs, which are designed to block the reuptake of acetylcholine. And so what happens is the more acetylcholine you have in your brain, the easier it is to learn and remember. So there are a couple really neat studies that show that when the brain gets low, and the other thing that choline does, remember that picture I showed you of the cell membrane with all the fats in it? Choline is one of these very stabilizing molecules. What's the stabilizing board called in a house? The structural beam? Choline does that for a neuron. And so what happens is when you get low in acetylcholine for learning and memory, your brain will steal it from your cell wall so that you can keep learning and remembering. But what happens is it leaves your neurons unstable and fragile. So I do think that choline supplementation, or at least dietary, focusing on choline in your diet is really important. I think we don't get enough choline. I don't know how many of you eat liver. Wheat germ, eggs, cod, Brussels sprouts are good sources. This is a supplement that it's one of the only supplements I take. But it will turn to acetylcholine in your body, and we've already talked about it, but it makes your Parkinson's meds work a lot better. It is used for stroke. It's not, the data is a little bit equivocal. I wouldn't say that I'm 100% confident it works, but it is a first-line therapy throughout Europe and Asia for post-stroke recovery. They try really hard to get choline, this exact product, in your body as quickly as possible to optimize recovery after a stroke. So we've already talked about how to eat fat, protein, vegetable protein, animal protein. Protein is a touchy subject. I eat meat. I think Americans probably eat too much meat. And if you can get more of your protein from non-animal sources, it is probably in your best bet. But if taking animal products out of your diet turns you to a carbotarian, I would rather you eat meat. I will just encourage you to eat, if you're going to eat animal products, I think not everyone can afford to eat everything organic. If you're going to pick and choose, make your animal products organic to the extent possible. And it really is true that grass-fed beef creates a very different meat product. There is less inflammatory byproduct in grass-fed beef as opposed to grain-fed. Micronutrients, we've already talked about this movie, Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead. I put it on there so you can all go watch it. This is really important, this whole diminishing digestive capacity with age. And with age, when I talk about you entering your elderly years, I'm talking about from 30 on. It's a little bit depressing, but it is true that from 30 years of age on, you begin to make less and less digestive juice. And so what happens is there is a stomach lining makes a certain type of cell called parietal cells, and they have two jobs: to make hydrochloric acid so you can digest your food, and to make your B12 absorbable. And the more stress you're under, the less functional those cells are. So between being over the age of 30 and probably being under stress, what's happening to most of us is we're not doing a good job digesting our food and possibly not getting our B12. B12 deficiency is the #1 most common nutritional deficiency in elderly. So if you're on if you had GERD, reflux, and you're on a hydrogen blocker, you have completely turned off your hydrochloric acid production supply. And what that does is it means that the acid is needed not only to absorb the nutrients in your food, but all those good healthy bacteria we were talking about need that acid to live. The wrong bugs grow in a basic environment. So when you take away that hydrochloric acid, you take away the acid that keeps the good bugs healthy. So there are some real tricks, and they're simple, easy tricks. I mean, there are people who take a handful of hydrochloric acid at every meal, 6 pills every meal. I don't know how they eat. I mean, that's like you fill up on your pills before you get to your food. But it works, and for a lot of people, it really does improve their quality of life. But if you don't want to take hydrochloric acid supplements, which I would prefer not to do, let me give you some tricks to make your own hydrochloric acid production a little bit better. So first of all, the stress. The way your nervous system works, your autonomic nervous system, is, you've heard of fight or flight? So it's one or the other. You are either in fight or flight or rest and digest. They cannot both be working. It's one or the other. It's a teeter-totter. And every second of every day, your autonomic nervous system is trying to figure out, are you stressed or is it time to rest and digest? The worst thing you can do is eat in a hurry, eat when you're upset, eat when you're mad, fast food. Because what happens is you start making that hydrochloric acid as soon as you start thinking about and smelling food. I didn't put it on here. One of my, I had about 15 years ago, some friends of mine got married, and her grandmother from Israel, she's probably 90 years old. I remember her pulling Amanda to the side and saying, I need to talk to you. I'm going to tell you the secret to a healthy marriage. And she said that the secret was, no matter how mad you were at your spouse, no matter what was going on, just make it so there was garlic and onions cooking on the stove when he walks in the house. And I laughed it off at the time, but as I've studied more and more nutrition, I'm not convinced that she's wrong. The hydrochloric acid you produce in your stomach has to digest what your teeth didn't. So the slower you eat, the more thoroughly you chew, the easier the entire digestive process is going to be. It is so much easier for your teeth to do the work than for your pancreas and stomach cells to do the work. So please take the extra time up front and chew slowly. Things like soups and stews are very easily digestible. Use your crock pot, pull it out. I mean, that is one of the best things in the world, to just throw some vegetables and legumes or meat into a crock pot. You come home from a day, meal's ready, it's all healthy, it's nutritious, and it's very easy to digest. And so, and many of you have noticed, as you've gotten a little bit older, the size of your meals is getting a little smaller, just naturally. That is your natural response to having less digestive enzyme to work with. That's why you feel better with a smaller meal, is because you don't have the same digestive power that you used to. So, and yeah.
You said the word enzyme.
Yeah.
And so you hadn't said, if there's nothing in there about that, but what are some enzymes that do help you?
So the enzyme conversation is tough. So hydrochloric acid is the primary enzyme in the stomach that begins the process. But what happens is when food moves from the stomach into the small intestine, then there are about 15 enzymes that come from your gallbladder and from your pancreas that finish the digestive process. So the answer to, like, can you give me a good digestive enzyme, really is, for someone who knows nutrition well, becomes well, are you eating mostly plants, or are you eating fats, and are you eating protein? And you can go to the supplement store and they'll have 40 different enzymes there. I mean, from papaya enzymes to lipase and pink, and so it really depends on what foods you need help digestion with. And so it's not as simple as you'd like to believe. I mean, for people who are lactose deficient, taking lactase is an enzyme that digests dairy, and that will help you overcome your lactose deficiency. And so there are a whole bunch of different enzymes depending on what you're trying to do. The take home here is that if you are over the age of 40 or 50, I say every year or two, ask your doc to order these tests, your MCV, if that's big. B12 and homocysteine are all signs of B12 deficiency, and that's what happens when your digestive juice gets low or your stomach stops doing what it's supposed to be doing. We've already talked quite a bit about this, but this is just the gut-brain connection. I put this on here just to let you know that more and more, even the conventional journals are talking about the gut as the second brain. What is going on in the gut with the intestinal microflora is becoming more and more commonplace. I've already talked to you about how the sheer numbers of organisms that are kind of pulling our strings and telling us what to do. I just want you to kind of have a sense of where we go wrong here. Antibiotics, thank goodness for antibiotics. They have saved many, many, many lives. We also tend to hand them out like candy for things that they don't necessarily help, like viral infections. And so what happens is when you kill the bug that is causing your strep throat, and trust me, I want you to take an antibiotic to kill the strep, you're also killing all of the bugs in your gut. I mean, if it's a gram-positive bug, you're going to kill it. And so you have to realize that those antibiotics don't just find that one bad one and get rid of the bad one. They kill them all. And so if you take a course of antibiotics, if you took a lot of antibiotics in childhood, that is where we're seeing a lot of this start to go wrong, is that initial dysbiosis. The first dose of probiotic, where you get the intestinal flora, is from your mother's vaginal canal as you're exiting. We are seeing that kids being born via C-section don't get that initial dosing. They're having more asthma and allergies because they haven't planted the right good bugs in their gut. And so there's this really neat line of research about taking kids who have been born via C-section and supplementing them with certain probiotics to help plant the right bugs in their intestines. So, you know, it's not that you made a bad decision yesterday. I mean, a lot of this stuff that is 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years going on. So good bugs come from a lot of different places. We already talked about the fermentation process. There's this book, Fresh and Fermented. There's another one called Wild Fermentation. This is the great season to make a bunch of sauerkraut and things like that. I mean, that is medicine. It is so good for you. I mean, it's vegetable. You get your fiber. You get your probiotics. I mean, these are really easy things to do that most people actually enjoy. Fiber. The good, healthy bugs that you want to grow live off fiber. The more fiber you eat, the better you're going to do. I wrote a book called Natural Therapies for Parkinson's, and in that book there's a little chart that has the fiber content of different foods. And it's valuable just to peek at, because you realize it is hard to get 20 plus grams of fiber per day. I mean, you really need to be, I don't know that it's possible unless you're eating a cup of beans. I mean, you need a half a cup of beans. If you do a half cup of beans and 5 servings of fruits and vegetables, you can probably get there. But if you don't have legumes, beans in particular, in your diet, it is really, really hard to get there. Artichoke hearts are also fabulous. But beans are the secret. Oatmeal's pretty good. We've already talked about low hydrochloric acid, and that's the other thing I'll say about that is the good bugs don't live without it. I think I mentioned that. In terms of broccoli, I just want to, this again, 3 weeks ago, this study just came out, but many of you saw it on the news. It was all over the news, but they gave kids with autism it was adults actually, 13 to 27-year-olds with autism, a broccoli extract, and it was amazing. They had less irritability. These are statistically significant improvements in irritability, lethargy, hyperactivity, awareness, motivation, and communication. And as soon as they stopped the supplement, they went back to normal. I mean, we are not talking about kind of weak science. I mean, this is real, and these things have a real biologic effect. And you know, you meet somebody who has attention deficit disorder, and they're taking their drugs for it, and no, this is really real, and you suggest, hey, have some more broccoli, and they're going to roll their eyes at you. It's so hard to make the connection between maybe some of the choices we're making are causing some of the symptoms we're having. But these studies are really helping kind of help us think about it from a different perspective. We've been talking about this study for the last couple days. This is brand new. This just came out about 2 weeks ago, I guess. This is probably the most important thing I have to say to you today. This is, you know, we have been calling Parkinson's, Alzheimer's disease, irreversible and progressive neurodegenerative diseases forever. To have a study come out and say 9 out of 10 people had reversal of their dementia is impressive. I mean, really, really impressive. And what they did was they did not use a single drug. There is no drug that's going to solve a problem so complex as neurodegeneration. And so what this researcher down in Southern California did, which was brilliant, was he used a systems-based approach. And he said, let's give people a cocktail of things that we know are good for them. All the stuff we've been talking about today. And so what he did was the diet was, the rules were minimize simple carbohydrates, get on a low-grain diet because high-grain diets are very inflammatory. You have to fast for 12 hours every night. You have to go 12 full hours with not eating food, including not eating for the 3 hours before bed. I bet you that alone made a difference. Where possible, they needed to optimize sleep. He supplemented melatonin and 5-HTP or tryptophan as sleep aids where necessary. Everyone had to exercise 30 to 60 minutes a day, 4 to 6 days a week, and everyone had to participate in some form of stress reduction, yoga, meditation. And then there were a whole bunch of supplements that not everybody was on, but depending on their needs and what was going on, if people's homocysteine levels were high, that homocysteine goes up if you're low in B6, B12, or folic acid. So if those were high, he would give a B vitamin supplement to bring homocysteine levels back down. Curcumin, we've already talked about. There are 6 pharmaceutical companies right now trying to find a way to patent curcumin so they can sell it as a neuroprotection drug. EPA and DHA are fish oils. Probiotics, we've been talking about. The prebiotics are the food for the probiotics. Ashwagandha is an Ayurvedic herb from India. It is a fabulous tonic. I don't use it much in my clinical practice, but I can't tell you the number of my Parkinson's patients who will come in and say, when I take a history and I say, do you have a problem with constipation? It is not uncommon to hear, I used to until I started ashwagandha, and then I've been fine ever since. And so it is considered an adaptogen. It kind of, if you're high, it'll bring you a little lower. If you're low, it'll bring you a little higher. But in Ayurvedic medicine, it's been it's like the ginseng of India. Citicoline, which I've already talked about my love of, is that CDP choline as a precursor to acetylcholine, learning and memory. Vitamin D, for those of you who were here this morning, I presented some data showing that the higher your vitamin D, if you had Parkinson's, the better your mood, balance, verbal word recall. There are a couple things that they had already discovered. Bacopa is another Ayurvedic plant. CoQ10, lipoic acid, vitamin C, coconut oil, and resveratrol is the antioxidant from red wine. So this is kind of the package. And 9 out of 10 people had sustained improvement in cognitive function over a year. And they said, in 6 of them, they said 9 out of 10 had improvement within 3 to 6 months. The one who didn't was late-stage Alzheimer's. Of the 6 patients who had stopped working or they were having problems at work, all of them were able to return to work. And this was still the benefit. The longest patient of these first 10 that was being followed has been 2.5 years out and is still experiencing the benefits. So this is a wow. This is a wow. I mean, it's not an easy solution. It's not a pill you can take and problem solved, but it is not true that neurodegenerative diseases are irreversible and progressive. So a word about anti-nutrients as we wrap up. Alcohol. I like a gin and tonic just as much as all of you, but it doesn't do much good for the body. It is truly a tremendous source of calories. It takes up a lot of space in the gut. It provides a tremendous amount of calories. It makes you not hungry for other foods. And it is a major anti-nutrient. It interferes with a bunch of B vitamin absorption, and then the act of just trying to deal with the fact that you just drank a toxin sucks you dry of a lot of your nutritional status. So people who drink more alcohol really do have more negative cognitive consequences. It is true that in moderation, the studies show that in terms of cardiovascular disease, 1 drink a day for women and 2 cups a day for men is actually better than being a teetotaler. And they've done a lot of research on what that is. At first, we thought it was the antioxidants in the red wine, but then we realized that it worked for whiskey and beer and gin too. And we've spent some time trying to figure out what is it about that little bit of alcohol that prevents cardiovascular disease. And what it seems to be, as far as the last time I looked, was there's some real value to taking the edge off. I mean, we don't meditate, and really there is some real value to your nervous system to unwind. And you do not need alcohol to do that. For those of you who don't do well with alcohol, you've had addiction issues, I mean, you don't need alcohol to unwind. It's just that there is some real value to finding something to take the edge off. And whether that's a dance class or going to the gym or whatever, I think you can get a lot of those benefits. I don't think that if you give up alcohol that you're going to really feel a bunch of negative health consequences. We've talked about the sugar. I've told you nothing good about sugar. And you know, all alcohol is fermented sugar. It certainly interferes with sleep, mood, hormones. This is what we were talking about with the hemoglobin A1C. Someone asked about this morning. So you can measure how much sugar is caked on your red blood cells by taking a blood test called a hemoglobin A1C. And that says, on average, how high has your sugar been over the last 3 months. What is amazing to me is you can see with age how these numbers go down, right? I mean, so the higher your sugar, the more brain you lose each year. We all lose brain with age, but every little incremental increase in blood sugar causes you to lose brain faster. What is so amazing to me is we call a 5.7 and up a problem. No, I mean 5.8 and up a problem. 5.7 and down is fine. So you can actually be the third worst. You can have a 5.6 or a 5.7. Your doctor will say, "You're great. Have a great day," and send you on your way. And what we're not doing is we're studying what does it take to not get overt diabetes. We're not asking what does it take to be healthy. And so I would just say that there's always room for more improvement. If your doctor says your vitamin D level is fine, your cholesterol level's not high, don't worry about it. Your hemoglobin A1C is fine. To ask a couple more questions. Ask for those numbers and learn a little bit more about what those numbers mean, because where we cut the line for good isn't necessarily where the body functions best. Life is not fair. It's just not. How you respond to sugar really depends on your genetics, your parents. I have patients who live off of candy and junk, and they have really low hemoglobin A1Cs. And I have patients who are doing everything right, and they're barely keeping it in check. I can't say anything other than this is biochemical individuality, and that's why we need blood work, and that's why we need to check, because you are not the same as your neighbor. What works for your neighbor doesn't necessarily work for you. I have not seen this movie yet, but this slide sums up something I've been talking to my patients about for years. Sugar is a drug. Sugar is absolutely a drug. And I like sugar just like the rest of you, and I'm not telling you that you shouldn't ever eat it. But what I'm telling you is we have really been sold a story about sugar. And I mean, just in the trailer for this movie, they say something about 80% of foods in the grocery store have added sugar. I mean, it's in absolutely everything. My kids get applesauce at school. It has added sugar. I mean, the apple juice has added sugar. I mean, the chocolate milk has added sugar. I mean, we are putting sugar in everything, and what we are doing is setting a terrible stage for a life of problems. And so I know that it sounds extreme to have me tell you that you shouldn't eat your cereal or you shouldn't drink a soda once in a while because of all the sugar, but really, it's not that different than cocaine. I mean, this whole idea that cocaine is really bad and a candy bar and a soda is okay is an insane contradiction. It just biologically, chemically makes no sense. They, in your brain, in your body, are the same. Your brain perceives them as the same. One is completely socially acceptable and encouraged, and every time my 7-year-old does well in school, her teacher gives her sugar. The other one you get caught with, you spend 6 years behind bars. I mean, it's an insane contradiction. And so I am not here to tell you that, I just want you to even that out and make informed decisions. It doesn't mean that you never ever touch sugar, but please hear me when I say, just because you put it in your mouth doesn't mean it's food. It's much of what we eat is a drug. And just being honest with yourself about that, I think, is a really important starting spot. I'm not eating this because I'm hungry. I'm not eating this because I lack nutrition. I'm eating this because I'm in a bad mood, and this drug is going to make me feel better. So sugar does a fabulous job of raising serotonin levels. It takes about 30 minutes after you eat sugar, you will make more serotonin. And you know how else you can make serotonin? You can fall in love. You can be sexually intimate with your partner. You can go exercise, or you can eat sugar. Which of those are the easiest to go do? I mean, when you're right. I mean, it's not a secret that we like to feel good. But really, it's not, I mean, I'm not blaming your biochemistry. I understand that desire to feel good, to have more serotonin. But what I'm asking you to do is start to train yourself to get into some exercise routine. And what you will find is once you find the routine, your sugar cravings do start to go away, because the reason you wanted the sugar in the first place is no longer applicable.
We have to learn to recognize all of the different names for hidden sugar.
Yes, yes. Here we go. 70% of Americans get more than the recommended. And first of all, I don't know that you should get 10% of your calories. Average Americans consume 22 teaspoons of sugar each day. This is huge. Toxicants, we're not going to get into all this. Just know that there are so many places food really, chemicals pollute our bodies. I've given some levels: heavy metals, pesticides. These are no take-homes, just kind of a wake-up call. Just because it's available in the grocery store doesn't mean it's safe. And let me just wrap up by talking about a little bit of neuroplasticity. We've already talked about getting the brain to change itself. This is one of the best books I've read in years, The Brain That Changes Itself. He really encourages you to do is pick up a new habit, really change things up, break your comfort zone, pick a language, pick an instrument, find something to do that pushes your comfort level. And really, you can walk 10 miles. It is not as good as having somebody leaving your comfort zone and going to the gym, to a gym where you've never been, with people half your age and trying to do some Zumba thing for 30 minutes. I mean, what you really want is, not only do you want the exercise, the blood flow is good, but the real benefit comes from your brain thinking, oh my goodness. Like, if this body is going to ask me to do things like this, I need to grow some new brain cells. And that is the benefit of the exercise. So the most impressive intervention I've ever seen for exercise was a study done at OHSU, Oregon Health Sciences University. They took people with Parkinson's, and Monday was boxing, Tuesday was ballet, Wednesday was water aerobics, Thursday was salsa, Friday was kickboxing. I mean, it was fabulous. I mean, they have video. People who could barely walk coming into the study, virtually asymptomatic by the end of the study. I mean, it was amazing. So if you love cycling, keep cycling, but I also want you to try kickboxing. I also want you to try salsa. I also want you to get out and break your comfort zone. We've already talked about a lot of these. This is just different ways to protect against lipid peroxidation. Cellular waste. This is wrapping up the importance of sleep. So I've already talked about this, and I just think this is such a beautiful picture. You don't have to understand the chemistry of it. But if you can see, the yellow and orange up there is how much cerebral spinal fluid bathes the brain while you're awake. The green zone is how much it bathes the brain while you're asleep. Same thing on the bottom. The yellow zone is when you're awake. The red is when you're sleeping. I cannot stress enough the importance of a good night's sleep. For those of you who are not sleeping, You need to find a way to sleep. Make that your #1 priority. Find out if you have sleep apnea. Make sure you're not drinking caffeine later in the day. You have to be exercising. One of the most inspirational people I've ever met in my life was Charlie Rosebush. He's still alive. He was my calculus professor 20 years ago. When he was teaching my calculus class, he was 80 years old. And he was ambidextrous, and he was more energetic than me. And he'd be writing equations with one hand and drawing diagrams with his left hand. You know, we were a bunch of 19-year-olds all nodding off in class. And I remember somebody asking him, how in the world do you have that much energy? And, you know, Charlie in his little voice, he's like, it's easy. I wake up every morning and I go play tennis at 6 a.m. and I go for a jog at 10 and he had this whole thing. And he said, I have one rule for living. He said, I have a rule. I sit down on the edge of my bed and I lift one leg up, I lift up my other leg, I start to lay down, and if I'm not asleep by the time my head hits the pillow, I know I haven't lived a full day. And there's something to that. I mean, ask anyone who spent the day chopping wood and carrying water and going for a hike. You sleep really well when you've used your body well. You have a sedentary lifestyle and you're restless and tossing around. I mean, that's your body screaming, I didn't get used enough during the day. I mean, you have to exercise and use your body and exhaust your body in order to have the sleep at night. So really, in terms of a good night's sleep, all I can say is work harder at that. Lox for breakfast. I told you I would give you some tips. I think this is a great way to stack the deck. This is one of my favorite breakfasts is, cashew, carrot, ginger soup, curried red lentil. I drink them like tea while I'm getting ready in the morning. By the time I walk out my door at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning, I've had 4 servings of vegetables, a bunch of fiber. I've had curcumin and turmeric. And I mean, it's easy to digest. It doesn't weigh me down like a bagel and cream cheese or bacon would. It's just, and like I said, I've had 4 servings of vegetables by 9 a.m. most mornings. They're cheap, they're organic, they're easy. Oatmeal is unbelievably nutritious. It has a lot of fiber. You can add cinnamon. A lot of my patients add coconut oil. They put walnuts on there, some berries. There are so many easy ways. It's cheap, it's inexpensive. Pico de gallo, chili, salads. The smoked salmon and kipper snacks and pickled herring, they're inexpensive, they're delicious. And I think I'll just end by saying dinner, really as much as possible. First of all, eat it with friends. The Mediterranean diet is worth looking into, but really try and make it so that the last 3 hours before bed, you're food-free. Desserts, chocolate is a great one. Fruit for dessert is fabulous. And this is the Harvard assessment of how one should eat. And so read through that. That's available online. I don't remember the name. Oh, Eat, Drink, and Be Healthy. Walter Willett is the director of public health and nutrition at Harvard. And he wrote a fabulous book called Eat, Drink, and Be Healthy. And it is basically how to eat in this crazy world in a way that the science says will keep you healthy. And it's very, very reasonable. So the conclusions: drink more water, be more aware of what you're eating, read your labels, avoid things that can hurt you, including alcohol, eat organic where you can. The more brightly colored your food, the better. I've told my kids Skittles don't count. Phytonutrients, things that come straight from the planet Earth, are fabulous for you, and fiber. Final thing I'll say is really kind of take your own inventory. Don't judge yourself. Don't get mad at yourself. This is not a stressful thing. Make little changes wherever you can, and just get in the habit of asking yourself before you put something in your mouth. First of all, is this food or is this drug? And do I want it? Do I need it? And is there something I could do instead of this that would give me fill the same need that's a little more nutritious? Avoid foods that take up space, provide calories that don't provide any micronutrition. That's it.